Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Em, and this is episode 8 and the final episode of Wheel of Doom Picks My Audiobook. So if you haven't caught any of these other episodes before, I will link the playlist down below. This is a monthly series I've been doing this year where I am trying to prioritize my extensive Libro FM back catalog of audiobooks, and I was just trying to gamify it. And this is the last one because I'm going to try and do something different in 2025. I don't know what it is yet. If you have any fun ideas, leave them down below because I'm always happy to crowdsource ideas for content, because at the end of the day, I want to make content that is fun for me to make, but I also want to make content that's fun for you all to watch. So let me know what you want to see. Anyways, I did this a little differently this month. I ended up pre-spinning for the 4 books that I'm going to read in this vlog. Well, 3 to 4 books that I'm going to read in this vlog, so that I could get the books from my library, because even though the core concept for this series is that these audiobooks need to stand on their own, I am in a phase of life right now where listening to an audiobook is really hard. I don't have a lot of uninterrupted audiobook time like I did earlier in the year, and just finding the time to only listen is really challenging. And so I wanted to make things easier for myself, help myself out a little bit, and so I set it up so that I could have a physical book for added support. That's what's going to be a little bit different on this episode. I'm also trying to shove as many of these audiobooks into clear your shit prompts as I possibly can. But again, if it doesn't fit, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. I also, in case you noticed a difference in vocal quality, lost my voice in a really big way this past week. My voice started to go Tuesday afternoon, and because I teach, and I teach small children, and I work Monday through Friday, I had to continue to teach with my voice going out. And so it's finally back in a way where I feel like I can record and I can talk more and it's not an absolute nightmare. But when I spun for these books, it was kind of at the beginning of this situation, and so my voice is going to sound rough. And I'm going to tell you that I have a sore throat because that's what I thought was going on. No, I was not sick. I just fully lost my voice. So hopefully the vocal quality will just improve as we go. So we're going to go back to Past Emily and see what book I spun for the first audiobook.
My voice sounds so rough. I don't even know what to tell you. Having a sore throat and a job where you have to talk a lot is not a good combo, but we need to do these spins now because I keep putting it off. So let's spin for book number 1. Little Weirds. Oh, good.
Alright, so we have Little Weirds by Jenny Slate. I believe this is like a memoir, or I know it's nonfiction and essays. I've heard this book. The weird part is not to be understated, that this book is really weird, and I think this is either going to really work for me or it's really not going to work for me. I'm curious to see which way it swings, but it's also so short, and I really appreciate that the wheel was so nice to me and gave me such a short audiobook right off the bat. I know I'm going to have to tackle those long audiobooks eventually, but until then, the short audiobooks, they're so great for momentum building and for feeling like I'm actually accomplishing something and not just sitting stagnant in my reading. So I really appreciate that. I will probably, since it's a book of essays, I think I will update as I go, because otherwise I think I'll just get to the end and I'll have totally forgotten every essay that I've read. But I will, I'll just keep you updated. Hello friends! Alright, let's do the happy updates before I give you the bummer update. First of all, these stickers that I ordered for my book journal arrived today. I realized when I ordered them that they were going to arrive late because they were coming from the UK, and I didn't realize they were coming from the UK when I ordered them, but they're here, and I'm just so happy they got here while it was still December. But how cute are these little hanging lights? Oh, they're adorable. I cannot wait to put them in my journal. I set up my journal already and then just left space for the lights. Is this one? Oh, this one's different. And this is the second page. Anyways, I think they're so darling. I can't wait to put them in my journal. I also ordered a book from Pango because I realized I had some favorite books of the year that I don't have physical copies of because I read them from the library and just never got around to buying them. So I'm trying to like rectify that before the end of the year. And if you didn't know, I am a Pango rep. So my link, if you want to try out Pango and you haven't tried it out before, that link is down below. But I ordered Out of Love by Hazel Hayes because I read this over the summer and absolutely loved it. I was obsessed with it. And it's like my favorite book of the year. Anytime anybody is like, what's your favorite thing you've read this year? This is my answer because I just thought this book was so lovely and heartbreaking. And I love it so much. So now I have a physical copy to put on my shelf. So I'm really happy about that. That means I also have a physical copy of my own to reread at some point when I'm ready for a reread. Okay, those are the fun things. Let's talk about the bummer. I'm halfway through. I don't know who Jenny Slate is. Apparently she's a comedian. She's a co-author of the book version of Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, which I know is made into a movie, but I haven't seen the movie and I haven't read the book. She's also a stand-up comedian. That's great. Her picture's back here. I don't recognize her. So I am not coming into this with any kind of like preconceived notion of what to expect from a book that has Jenny Slate's name on it. And I don't want to yuck anyone's yum, but this feels like the most Enneagram 4 book to ever be written. Like it's not even that she's, I don't know, I don't want to say it's so weird because I feel like but it's not, I think the thing I'm struggling with is that it's like, what are the point of all these essays? Like they feel like nonsense words strung together and I just don't know. It feels so silly and like she's being weird just for the sake of being weird and not to be in any way authentic. I don't know. It was like she had this whole thing in one of the essays and all the essays are random, like they're not connected in any way. But I was listening to this one where she's going to Norway and she's talking about how she's in the airport in Norway and that there's this businesswoman buying a hot dog. And I'm just going to read you because I think this paragraph kind of encapsulates how I'm struggling with it. In the USA, a businesswoman would not feel so free or dispassionate about buying a hot dog in an airport. I can't really imagine an American businesswoman doing this without imagining her either laughing or crying about it. Her hot dog purchase would be a sign of something going on with her. This Norwegian woman was just having lunch. And I'm like, okay, so like I don't get it. It's too weird for me, I think. And it's going to update sooner, but I wanted to keep going because I was like, well, what if I just haven't gotten to the essay that clicks yet? But I don't think there is going to be an essay that clicks because I don't know that I'm necessarily the audience for this type of book, you know? My battery's about to die. I'll come finish this update later. Okay, friends, I finished Little Weirds by Jenny Slate last night, and I'm giving it a 2. I don't know. Okay, so I feel one of two ways about this. I don't know, or one, I don't know if this is better to read in physical versus audio. There were times yesterday where I thought if I had to read this physically, I don't know if I would ever get through it. But then there were other times where I thought, trying not to be mean, where I thought her voice made it worse. Like it made all the metaphors and all the similes sound more pretentious and unlike the most stereotypical of special snowflake, Enneagram 4, LA actor vibes. I feel like that's really mean. I'm so sorry because it's memoir. Like she's writing about, I mean, not directly, you really gotta look for it, but she's writing about heartbreak and her fears and she's in her insecurities and like those are all valid, but just the way she went about describing this and like every once in a while a metaphor or a sentence would land and I'd be like, oh yeah, that's like I like that. I like how she worded it. But for the most part, it's just like metaphor on top of metaphor on top of metaphor. And I think it just, I didn't feel like this was weird in an organic, vulnerable kind of way. I felt like this was weird for the gimmick a lot of the time, and I'm not necessarily into that. I don't want weird for the gimmick. Like, if you have weird thoughts, I want to hear those weird thoughts, but I don't know. This just didn't feel genuine for me as a reader. Now, if you go online, because I went on Storygraph, and this has quite a few 5-star ratings. Like, there are people who really love this book where what Jenny Slate is saying really speaks to them. And so I don't want to necessarily like discourage you from reading this book, because I just think it's one of those books where it's either going to really hit and it's going to resonate, or it's going to be kind of off-putting in its weirdness. And unfortunately, I fall into the it's not for me camp. So giving it a 2, which I don't love doing, because again, it's like, it's not really a memoir, but it's kind of like, it's a very personal book. I'm assuming it's a very personal book for Jenny Slate. So I don't like giving books like this a 2, because that feels weird to like be rating somebody's life experience, but enjoyment wise, like if we're just going for enjoyment, it was a 2. Form and style, I can't really speak to, because it just was not for me. All done with that one, and we're gonna go back to Past Emily to find out what book number 3? No. Book number 1. Book number 2? What number are we on? Find out what book number 2 is.
All right, we're back for spin number 2. Hopefully it's not anything too long. I can't read that. What is it? Stop Boy. Oh, that's middle grade. That's really short too.
Okay, friends, so Stump Boy in the Meantime. This is by Jason Reynolds, and the illustrations are by Raoul III. I read this in 2 sittings. I read a good chunk of it in the evening, and then I finished it all up the next morning, and this is so good. So, like, for what this is, middle grade, it's a chapter book, but it's one of those chapter books that really kind of blends graphic novel and a more traditional chapter book, like, so super well. For all of that, I am giving this a 5 stars. This is delightful. I enjoyed this so much. It's also one of those where I am so torn on whether you should listen to the audiobook or read it physically, because the audiobook production was so good. It was so good. It was full cast, there was music, there was sound effects. Every part of the audiobook was just so well done and so fun. And I really feel like, I'm not quite sure who read the narration and read Portico's perspective, but that narrator brought so much life to Jason Reynolds' words, and it made it such a fun audiobook experience. So like, I would 100% recommend the audiobook. And if you have a kid that you're trying to get into audiobooks, I would start with this one. I think this is super engaging, and this could get a kid hooked. I mean, it definitely got me hooked. And the next morning when I was reading this, and I wasn't using headphones because no one else was awake yet, and my oldest woke up first and came out, and she just sat down on the couch and listened to the audiobook with me. And I was partway through. So usually like I'd get a lot of questions about what was happening, but I think because the audiobook was so engaging, she just sat down and she just listened, because there was so much going on and there was so much to take in, and it was just such a fun product, I guess. But in the physical, there's illustrations. Like, Raoul III is a great illustrator. Like, he's super talented. So he's got like so much color, and make sure that my white balance isn't too aggressive, but there's there's so much color, and there's sound effects, and there's, oh, I wanted to find, okay, so in this book, we're following Portico, who lives in this apartment building in New York. I'm assuming, I don't think they actually say where it is, but I just assumed it was New York. And he lives there with his mom and his dad and his grandma and his best friend, Zola. She lives a few doors down. There's a boy that bullies Portico and Zola who also lives in this apartment, and Portico has this alter ego in his head called Stunt Boy, and that's because Portico tends to have what is basically anxiety, but he calls it the frets, and it's when his, something is happening and his tummy starts to hurt and he starts to get anxious basically. And so Stunt Boy is this alter ego he's invented to help him navigate when he is feeling anxious or nervous or scared. And so you're seeing Portico's world through his eyes and also through Stunt Boy's eyes. And really what's the big plot of this book is that Portico's parents are getting divorced and are starting they're going to be moving into two separate apartments. But it takes Portico a long time to realize that they are divorcing, because the way they pitch it to him at first is that they're going to be moving to a new apartment, but they're staying in the building, and they're going to have an apartment on the 3rd floor and an apartment on the 5th floor, I think. And then they live on the 4th floor right now. My memory might be a little hazy on those details. And Portico's like, oh my gosh, cool. 2 different apartments in our castle, which is what he refers to the apartment building as. That will be awesome. And then he slowly comes in and, every time he comes home, his parents are fighting over something in the house. And that's where in the meantime comes from, is every time Portico comes in and his parents will say, hey, we're trying to figure this out. In the meantime, can you go da 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 da? And Portico and his friend Zola are both into this TV show called Space Warriors. And a lot of the time when something is going on, Zola or Portico will relate it back to an episode of Space Warriors and will talk about that episode and how it went. And so those pages are written to look like a comic book or a more traditional graphic novel. And so that part is super cool. And I just loved it. So I don't know. I mean, this is something you could immersion read. That's what I did. But I think whether you decide to go a physical read or an audiobook read, I mean, I don't think there's a wrong way to consume this book. And while the audiobook doesn't have these wonderful illustrations, it has a lot of, it brings a lot of the humor in, and it brings a lot of fun with the sound effects and the full cast narration. But then if you read the book, you have this art to look at, which also brings a lot of life and personality to it. So just excellent middle grade book. And I'm so glad this came up, because I really didn't think I was ever going to get around to this, because I can feel myself slowly moving away from middle grade as it goes. Hopefully it's just like a phase, but I mean, I am 40. It might just be time for me to be done reading middle grade, which would be really sad, but also it happens. So I'm so glad this came up on the wheel, because this was just really such a big win for me. And we're going to go to Past Emily now, and we're going to get book 3.
Here is spin number 3. Oh, okay. 1619 Project. Okay, that'll be fine.
So the beauty in spinning ahead of time, I think, is that even though I did get a very long book, because I knew ahead of time that this was going to be coming up in the spinning, I was able to start it already. And so I am 70 pages into this, which is great, because it is 500 pages. And already this did not meet what my expectations were, which is great. So the 1619 Project, this was created by Nicole Hannah Jones, and it was a feature in the New York Times, marking the 400 years since the first enslaved people set foot on the shores of the United States. And I remember when this came out in the New York Times. I never read it. I've never really been somebody who actively engages with the New York Times in general. not for any purposeful reason. It's just not like a news source that I go to. But I remember hearing about it because obviously it caused some hurt feelings among a certain demographic of white people. And so I'm familiar with it in that regard. And then I've had this book on my radar since it came out. Like, I was still book selling when this came out, and I wanted to read it, and I've had the audiobook obviously the whole time too. And I thought it was just like a history text, and it's a mix of biography. No, it's a mix of nonfiction and fiction, which I think is really interesting. So far we've had 2 essays that are historical. They had a really lovely foreword written by Nicole Hannah Jones on her experience growing up and what her family life was like, and what her experience was with how Black history is taught in the United States and the presence of Black people in the United States is taught, and what she learned on her own and what she's trying to pass on, what knowledge she's trying to pass on in taking on this project. And I really loved, I guess it's technically a preface, really loved her preface. And then there's a poem, which is great. And then there is the first chapter is also by Hannah Jones, and that one is about the US history specifically. And then there's 2 poems. And then the second chapter, which I think is the one I already won, that's about race. And that one is tough. That was a tough essay to read because, I mean, not that I think any part of this book is going to be fun, but that one was about when Congress decided to tie ownership of slaves to their mothers. And so any child born to an enslaved woman was automatically enslaved themselves. And the way that was used to just, I don't know, it's just so horrific, like all across the board. It's just so horrific. And there's a lot about how Black women were assaulted and are assaulted, and the gross justification white men use to make it okay to assault a Black woman, but instead of assaulting a white woman. And it's just so gross and so unnecessary in so many ways. And then there were 2 more poems. So we're alternating historical essays about real history with poems. There are going to be some short stories, it looks like, further in. I just haven't gotten to those ones yet. But I like this mix of, you have an essay where you're learning something about real historical events, people, documents, procedures, whatever. And then it's broken up by like a poem or a short story that is still, like, none of this is light, easy breezy reading. Like, it's all pretty tough subject matter. But I really like the structure of it so far. Obviously, this is not like my full review. I'm going to come and update you as I continue on, but I'm going to continue listening, and I am really liking the audiobook. I have no idea how long it will take me to get through this. I listened to those first 70 pages pretty quick, so I'm hopeful, but I'm really delighted that this came up because this is a book that I really wanted to read, but I definitely needed like a gentle shove to finally pick up. Hello friends, I am 58% through the 1619 project. I don't know why I couldn't remember that name. I'm getting ready to go to the gym real fast, but I wanted to give you like a really quick update before I'm done with the book. So my primary thought is that because this book has so many different authors, it also has so many different narrators. Each essay has a different narrator. Each poem or short story has a different narrator. And because there's so many narrators, there's a lack of, what's the word I want? There's a lack of cohesion, I guess, in the quality of each section, because some narrators, I'm finding the narrators for the essays are all pretty good, and that, like, the quality of the audiobook feels similar. It's really in the the short stories or the poems that you can kind of feel like the discrepancy, like not all narrated, not everybody. And I don't know if it's that the poets are reading their own work, and so not all the poets are audiobook narrators, but I'm just noticing a discrepancy like in quality between each of the tracks. So I would say that's my primary thought so far. I could really take or leave the poems or the short stories, because the short stories are so short, just a couple of pages. And so you can't really, like, they're more supporting all the stuff you just learned in the essay. And so have more of like a bird's eye view or a wide lens view. And so they're not super impactful. I'm also just not a poetry girl. So if you are a poetry reader, you would probably get more out of those sections than I do. But because I'm not really a poetry person, the poems are kind of going in one ear and out the other. Like they're kind of like a break from all the info that I'm taking in the essays. So I definitely prefer the essays. I don't love the like little interludes. I do appreciate how, so we'll have an essay. I'm gonna get out the book so I can maybe show an example since I just finished. Okay, so at the end of the citizenship essay, just about the path to getting citizenship for Black Americans and the novelty of birthright citizenship, because the United States is one of the few democracies that has a birthright citizenship. There are other democracies that don't. A lot of the other democracies in the world do not have that in their constitution, and how birthright citizenship was weaponized against Black Americans and also Chinese Americans, and just what the history of that was. Very interesting. I learned a lot in that section. And then there's like a little thing. This one's about Lincoln reading the Emancipation Proclamation and this specific gathering at Camp Saxton, where one of the first Black military brigades heard or read Lincoln's address. And then a couple other people were there. And then we get a short story imagining what that situation, like what that real situation was like in a fictional landscape. And so this is one of the ones where like I found the short story itself very removed from what was going on. So it didn't feel like it lent a whole lot to the essay. And then after that, there's another thing, like another real life event, and then a short story interpretation of that real life event. And so that's how we're going through it. Yeah. So like I said, I find the essays really interesting and really engaging and really informative. Did I already say that? I can't remember. But I could take or leave the other stuff. So that's it. I'm going to go work out, and hopefully I'll be back tomorrow to update you. Tomorrow's well, it's not a full day off. I do not have to be at work until 3:30, and the children are at school for, up until an hour before that. So I'm hoping I'll get a lot of uninterrupted audiobook time in, but I also need to go Christmas shopping because I've been putting it off, and it's now like the 12th and the panic is starting to set in that I won't get the stuff that I need in time. So, but I can listen to an audiobook while I Christmas shop. That does not need my full attention. Okay, now I'm just rambling. I'm going to go work out, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Good morning, friends. Oh, sorry. This is not the best lighting I've ever had, but it's early, so that's okay. I finished the 1619 project. I'm gonna give it 4.5 stars. Really, it's not a 5-star just because I'm not a poetry fan. I found the essays impactful enough that I didn't really need the poetry or the short stories to back up or add emotional weight to the information that I was receiving. So that's the only reason it's not a 5-star. But I did get a lot out of this. I felt like this was really well constructed, very thoughtfully put together. Information is all very necessary. Now, that being said, they did get some like really fantastic authors to lend their voices to this. Towards the end, there were a couple that I did like. I'm not saying I didn't like these and these are bad poems or bad short stories. It's just not my preferred, like, not short stories. You all know short stories are not my thing either. And so I just wanted the information. But like Jason Reynolds did have a verse in here that I really liked. Denez Smith, who is maybe the only poet that I like, where like I will actively read their poetry collections when they were published. Like they had a piece that I really liked. Who else? Yeah, Jesse had a short story in here, which was fine. It wasn't like super impactful, but my ears perked up because I recognized her name. Jasmine Ward has a short story in here. So like I said, like a really great group of authors. It's just not my thing. And that's okay. I would definitely recommend this. This is a very comprehensive 400 plus year history of the United States. And it starts in 1619, obviously, and ends in 2021 because they do talk, a couple of the essays do mention the insurrection and Floyd's murder and the race riots that occurred afterwards. And so it does go through all of our history. This is not where I would start. If you are just diving in to understanding history of race and racism in the United States, I think this is a denser text. And this is one to read after you have some like foundational books under your belt, or if you know somebody who is ready to start learning this information. This is not where I would start. I would probably start with Stamped from the Beginning, but with the teen edition. I read that first, and that's obviously Stamped from the Beginning is written by Ibram X. Kendi, but Jason Reynolds adapted it for teens, and it breaks down all the information so well and makes it, I don't know, it was just so easy to consume. And then from there, I was able to read Stamped from the Beginning, which is a little bit denser and definitely thicker, but because I had like that base knowledge, it was like reading the teen version of Stamped from the Beginning was like getting a primer text, and then I was able to go and like deep dive. So that's typically where I recommend starting, but obviously there's a plethora of books to choose from to like for like educational purposes. So yeah, you do you. Basically. I'm so happy I finally read this. I did have deja vu a couple of times of like, oh, I feel like I've read this before. And I don't know if I inadvertently read like a few of the essays other places before reading this. But like, I definitely had a couple moments where I was like, wait, have I actually read this book before? I just totally wiped it from my memory for some reason. But that's not the case. Anyways, loved it. We're going to go back to Past Emily and see the final spin for book 4. And we'll come back.
All right, and this is theoretically the final spin. We'll see if the 1619 project doesn't take me out. Okay, all right, not too shabby. That's another short one.
Okay, so I have oddly kind of a funny history with I'm Not Hungry But I Could Eat. I initially got this as an ARC at a bookseller convention a few years ago, and I don't remember why I took it. I think the rep did a really good job pitching it. Either that or it was that stage of the convention where reps were like desperately trying to get their ARCs into booksellers' hands, and I didn't want to tell that rep no, which might have been. But I have a history of liking food memoirs. I believe this author is a chef, and this is like memoir in essay form about events in his life. I listened to the first chapter as I drove to the grocery store, and it was him talking about how he's going to we got a new washer and dryer party at some white friend's house, and just kind of pointing out some of the ridiculous things white people do or say. And he's recently broken up with his girlfriend, and this couple is kind of like his link back to her still. And while he's there, like wine gets spilled on his sweater, and he steals, or before that, he steals a photo of the 4 of them from the couple's bedroom and puts it in his hoodie pocket, and then wine gets spilled on his hoodie, and the husband of this couple takes his hoodie to put it in the washer to prove like how like awesome and efficient and like the washer is. And then of course it like ruins the photograph. But so it was interesting. I don't know how I feel about the vibe so far. Obviously it's just like one, I don't even know if it counts as an essay, but like a story. I don't know if I totally got like the point of telling that particular story, but I don't know. We'll see how the other ones are and kind of how they all like connect and weave together. But this is definitely like a book I've kind of circled around for a bit, because obviously like I had the physical arc and then I got rid of it because I'd had it in the house for such a long time without reading it. But then I got the audiobook and it was available as an ALC. So clearly this is like a collection I've been interested in. But yeah, it's super short though. It's like if I keep it at 1.8 speed, it's going to take me an hour and a half to finish it. If I bump it up to 2, it'll be even shorter. So I'm hoping I can listen to it today because today's Saturday. I decided today is going to be the clean all the things day so that tomorrow I don't have to worry about it. And then my twins, their production of A Christmas Carol opened last night. So they have performance again this evening and they'll have a performance tomorrow. So I'd like to definitely like wrap this up today since we have most of the day free, though it's already like 11 o'clock. So days flying by, but I'm going to go home. I'm going to have some more caffeine and we're going to listen and hopefully it'll be a good time. Fingers crossed. Oh my gosh, I'm such a dummy. This is a short story collection. Not memoir. Okay. So yeah, I was wondering why there are multiple narrators. It's a short story collection. I'm significantly less interested. And also I've gone so many years thinking this was a memoir, like so many years. Okay. All right. Well, that's embarrassing. Okay, well, thank goodness this book was short because boy, oh boy, was I not the reader for this book. First of all, can we make 2025 the year of no short story collections? I feel like I really tried this year. I tried a bunch, wide variety, different types, different genres, different authors, and it's just not my bag. And I don't want to try it next year. So this is definitely like literary fiction short stories, and these are primarily all about gay or bisexual Puerto Rican men, and they're all kind of weird in the way that queer literary fiction can be kind of weird. Also, why is literary fiction write about sex in such a depressing way and in such a weird way? I get it. I read a lot of romance, or historically I have read a lot of romance, and romance sex is very like romanticized, obviously, and kind of has like a fantasy aspect to it and is not realistic. But man, I would rather read that than like the way literary fiction writes about sex is just so unappealing. So yeah, this also kind of felt, I don't know, it's not for me. It's not for me. If you like literary fiction, sometimes this was even kind of like bro-y. So like it very much felt like a book that a man wrote for other men to read. So in so many ways, I am not the target audience for this. So unfortunately, it's a very underwhelming 2 stars. All that time circling around this book, I would have liked this a lot more, I think, if it had been memoirs from a chef. I would have been way more into that. Oh well. So with that, we're at the end of this episode of Wheel of Doom, the final episode of Wheel of Doom. Thanks for following along. I wish we hadn't ended on a low rating because I always feel like that's a bummer of a way to go out, but oh well, sometimes that's how we go out. If you would like to leave a comment, let me know your thoughts on any of these books, and if you just want to leave an emoji to let me know you were here. I guess let's do a food emoji. And like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll talk to y'all in the next one. Bye!